My name is Michael, and an applications engineer at Sourcegraph. And today I'll be talking about implementing code search and batch changes using Sourcegraph. I would like to ask, how many of us have heard about Sourcegraph before? Show of hands. Wow. Today, wow, not so much. Okay. Yeah, well, not so much. Yeah, in this workshop, I'll be talking about what Sourcegraph is, and I'll be doing a bit of storytelling with code search, and then we'll have a little hands-on with batch changes, and then I'll be talking about who else uses Sourcegraph. And then by the end of this workshop, you should be able to understand Sourcegraph on a high level. You should be able to write search queries and perform code search, and you should be able to understand how batch changes works. So please follow along. Yeah. So we live in a world that is constantly evolving and dependent on technology. Do we agree? Almost every industry now is powered by technology. We have AI, cloud computing, software development, front end, back end, everything is making use of technology nowadays. And the more many of all these industries depend on software. Software is you have to write code to build a software here. The more companies are dependent on technology, the more code base we have, the larger the code bases we have. The more products are being shipped, the more code bases we have. Now, we have a situation whereby, I'm just going to paint a scenario, a situation whereby you have, let me say, 100 repositories of code, and you're a software engineer, you're working in a company, and then, or probably you just joined the company, and then you're trying to get familiar with their code base. And the first thing you're seeing is 100 repositories. I mean, it's overwhelming, yeah? Do you all agree? It's very overwhelming. Now, this is one of the problems Sourcegraph is trying to solve. Sourcegraph helps you perform code search. So, Sourcegraph is a code search and intelligence tool for developers. It is a web-based application that enables you to find and navigate code. It doesn't just do only that. It gives you code intelligence, batch changes, and a whole lot of other stuffs. Yeah, so that's basically what Sourcegraph is trying to solve. It's a developer's platform designed to tackle the problems faced by modern software teams. What is this problem? Every day we have new codes, building up. Yeah, so before I continue, I would like to ask a question, and anybody that gets the answer gets a giveaway from me. Which company has the largest code base in the world? If you want to talk, can you raise up your hand so that? No? No? The answer is Google. So, I mean, Google has over 2 billion lines of code. Like, can you imagine? Imagine you're a software engineer, and I know Google has different sections. Sorry? Billions. Yeah. So imagine you're an engineer at Google, and then even though you don't have to go through the 2 billion lines of code, imagine you're going through half of 2 billion. It's a whole lot, and it can get overwhelming. Yeah. So that's something to point out. So what are some of the main features of Sourcegraph? With Sourcegraph, you can perform code search. Yeah, like I'll be talking about. You can get code intelligence, and Sourcegraph is very easy to install. We have a web UI. I'll be showing us as we go on in this presentation. We have a web UI, open source Sourcegraph version, whereby you can easily just visit and then perform whatever code search you want to do. And at the same time, you can choose to self-host Sourcegraph on your own environments using Docker, installing via Docker, Docker Compose, or Kubernetes. So there are various ways by which you can use Sourcegraph. And one of the coolest things about our code search is we get to give you results in split seconds. Sourcegraph will return search results to you in less than 10 seconds, regardless of how large, whatever you're looking for is, maybe it's scattered across different repositories, you would get results within 10 seconds. So that's one of the coolest things about Sourcegraph. And Sourcegraph gives you code intelligence, like jump into definition. For example, you're looking for a function, you want to know where this function was defined, you want to know where it was referenced, you want to just know something about a particular function, with the code intelligence feature in Sourcegraph, you get to have all this. Yeah, and then you can integrate Sourcegraph with your GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and I think, yeah, those are the ones we support currently, yeah. Whereby if you're on GitHub and then you want to just probably get some code intel, you could just use Sourcegraph and then let me see if I can show you an example of what I'm talking about. Let me see, let me just go to my GitHub. So yeah, this is basically what the Sourcegraph browser extension looks like. Can we all see? Okay, good. So here, this is the version of the browser extension I'm using. So you can see it supports GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. I actually don't know what the last one is, but yeah. So this is the Sourcegraph URL that I have connected to my GitHub. So I could choose to decide to change this to sourcegraph.com. I said sourcegraph.com is the open source version of Sourcegraph, and then you can use to self-host Sourcegraph, in your own environment. So this version here is a self-hosted version of Sourcegraph that has all of the repos I want to have on Sourcegraph. Sourcegraph helps you to find example code. It helps you to explore and read code. So for example, you have a code review section, and then someone is trying to understand what you've done. You could use Sourcegraph using the code intel feature, to navigate your code. Okay, this is where this function was called. This is where it was referenced. This is how it's being used. Stuff like that. You can do all these things with Sourcegraph. Sourcegraph helps you to debug issues. It helps you to find bugs in your code. When you have to manually use your eye to scan through, look through. No, you don't need to do all those things with Sourcegraph. Once you have your repository on Sourcegraph, you can easily bring in your repos on Sourcegraph, then search through, figure out, okay, this is where this problem is coming from, this is where this is happening, and all those things. With Sourcegraph, you can find and replace. Probably you have a function. I'm using function a lot because this is something we all can relate with, right? Yeah, so you have a function, maybe that's not the right variable name to use, and then you have used it in different places. Now, you have to go back and change it, right? Maybe you move from one file to the other. How many days you want to do something like that? It's tedious, right? But with Sourcegraph, using batch changes, which I'll be showing us a few things you can do with batch changes. With batch changes, you can make this change at once across different repositories, whatever the number of files you have in your repo. With Sourcegraph, you can make this change within minutes, depending on how large your repository is. Now, with Sourcegraph, you can locate a specific piece of code. Yeah, that's still the same thing as code search. And then it helps you determine the impact of a change. So basically, Sourcegraph makes it faster and easier to perform all these tasks for you and everyone else in your organization. So how can you use Sourcegraph? I said, yeah, you can. Let me see if this one is already opened. Yeah, so this is what this Sourcegraph open source version looks like. We have, we can see similar to the Google we are all familiar with. So it's like Sourcegraph is like the Google for developers. Google, you can perform any type of search, but Sourcegraph, it's basically for code search. So you just type in whatever you need to search, and then you get your results, and then you do whatever you want to do with whatever results that is being displayed. So this is one way you can use Sourcegraph. The other way is to have it self-hosted. So like I said, you can install Sourcegraph using Docker, using K8, using Docker Compose. Yeah, so those are some of the ways you can use Sourcegraph, and then we can also help you manage your Sourcegraph deployment. So if you don't want to host it, if you don't want to have the burden of having to manage your instance, running all those things, we can also provide that feature for you. And then you can also use our Sourcegraph's CLI. You just happen to install it, and then you perform the same thing you can do with the web UI. You'll be able to do it using the CLI. So we have different ways by which you can use Sourcegraph. Yeah, so yeah, we can say that it's similar to what I just showed us. Yeah. Yeah. So there are different ways by which you can perform code search using Sourcegraph. We have the literal search, we have the reject search, and we have the structural search. So the literal search is useful when you know exactly what you're looking for. For example, you already know the name of the variable, the name of the function that you're looking for. You just put it in the search box, and then Sourcegraph gives you your results. So it gives you results wherever the function you put in, wherever the variable you put in, where it is being used, it gives you that result. And then a simple example is React caught an error. So let me see if I can quickly, if the network will allow me to do that. Even though it's still loading, we can see that there are different places that this React caught an error, is being used. So we can see it in the React fiber error logger.js. So depending on whatever you're looking for, you can easily go to the file where you want to do whatever you want to do, and then just click on it, and you're a developer, so you know what you're looking for here. So that's an example of a literal search. Now, moving on, the next thing is the reject search. The reject search is used when you have a pattern. When you have a pattern you are searching for. For example, the easiest example I can think of right now is maybe you're trying to search for hexadecimal colors in CSS, and then you just put in the pattern, and then you put in the language. So Sourcegraph understands is compatible with various languages: Python, JavaScript, C, C++, CSS, think of it, you name it. Sourcegraph supports any of all those things. So you just specify the language type. So what Sourcegraph does is, okay, it takes in your regex pattern, and then it understands that you're looking for this regex pattern in any CSS file that you have on Sourcegraph. So you're able to run your search using regex search. And the last one is the structural search. Now, the structural search helps you to search code for syntactical code patterns like function calls, arguments, if-else statements, try and catch statements, and is useful for finding nested and recursive patterns as well as multi-lines block of code. Now, the difference between the structural search and the regular expression is it takes into account the syntax of the code, the balanced brackets, the limiters, and the quoted strings. So if you have an idea of what your code syntax look like, you just specify here. So this fprintf is a Golang syntax. This stdr is, so Sourcegraph understands that you're looking for this particular word that has this code pattern, and then it returns a list of results from your repository or the open source repository that we have indexed. So by the way, Sourcegraph has millions of open source repositories indexed already that you can run your search on. So for instance, if you don't want if you have like your private code search, maybe you have your private repositories and you don't want it to be available to just anybody, this is where the hosting Sourcegraph on your server comes in handy. So only you and whoever is in your organization have access to the repositories in your Sourcegraph instance. But using the Sourcegraph UI, the open source one I just showed us, it's open sourced, and there are a lot of repositories that we have indexed, so anybody can see whatever code that is indexed by Sourcegraph. When you're performing code search on Sourcegraph, we make use of search queries. What are search queries? These are like parameters that Sourcegraph understands that. So if you are looking for example, if you are trying to search for a repo, just specifying the repo parameter. If you are looking for a file, you specify the file parameter. If you are looking for a language, you use that. Content, count, after, before. So the after is if you are looking for, is useful when you are looking for commit and diffs type. That's what maybe happened that was done before this date or after this date. This is where the before and after comes in. I'll be showing us examples of this soon. So we are moving to code search live application. So this is a scenario. Sam is a new hire at Sourcegraph. He's currently in his second week of onboarding as a mid-level software developer with the front-end team. As part of his week 2 task is to get familiar with the package.json files in the repo within the next 2 days. Sam doesn't know where the server folder is located in the Sourcegraph repository. How can Sam speed up this in the shortest possible time? So imagine you are given this and then you don't even know where the files are located in. You just came into the company. You have to navigate your way around. Now let me just show us how this works quickly. So let me just quickly explain what we have here. So we can see the parameters that I showed us in the tabular form. So if you are searching for something in a particular repo, you use the repo parameter, which we have here, and then you specify the name of the repo. So the Sourcegraph, this is the open source version of Sourcegraph on GitHub. So it was specified here. And then we are looking for files that are package.json. And then the count all means give me results of all of the package.json files in the Sourcegraph repository. So imagine this scenario using your own organization code. You're trying to look for something, you're trying to look for a particular file in your organization code base. So with this, you have results of all of the package.json file in the Sourcegraph repository. And if you look at it, there are 13 results. So you return 13 results in 0.01 seconds, which is very, very fast, Yeah. So this is an example of how Sam can get this. So he already knows that, look, within the next 2 days, I have to understand, about 13 package.json files. And, Sourcegraph have already helped him shorten the time, and he can learn and, upskill and get familiar with the code base. So moving on, I'll paint another scenario for us. Anna is a data scientist and a tech lead at Net Data. She needs to make a batch change of the word collector list. Now, for example, let me just paint this scenario. The word collector underscore list is present in numerous files in that particular repo. Now imagine having to go through one by when will you finish? Like, it's going to be time consuming and overwhelming. So let's see how Sourcegraph can help save Anna from this. So once again, we already know that Anna works at Net Data, and Net Data have their repository open sourced. So you just specify the repo name again, then it's the repository on GitHub, and then you just type in the name of what you are looking for. We can see that this is an example of what type of search. Anybody wants to try? I said there are 3 types of search on Sourcegraph: literal search, reject search, structural search. So what example of code search is this? Thank you very much. It means you're following. This is an example of a literal search. Anna knows what exactly she's searching for on Sourcegraph. So here we have the results. You can see there are different files that, this particular word is being used, and we have about 33 results. So this is an example. Yeah. So let me show us the third one, the third scenario. So let's imagine that we are to investigate a bug that only happens when an array part is empty. When an array part is empty, we are looking for if statements where the condition starts with a check for whether the array is empty. So let's see how we can do this using Sourcegraph. So before I continue here, what type of search do you think this is? Sorry, I can't hear you. Structural search, yeah. Because you already know the code part, the code syntax. You already know how. You have an idea of what you're looking for. So you just specified it here. You know, the fprintf, the stder, then what the three dots here means is it takes in. So what this means is this is constant. You're looking for this. You're looking for this. Then any other thing that comes in here. But those two, they are constant. Now what we have here is this is going to throw results in the C language, and then it's going to throw results in the Linux repository. So we can see different search. This is called search queries. You can see different use cases of the Sourcegraph search query. I hope we are following. All right. So I said that's an example of structural search here. So the fourth one, I think this one. So you're trying to match RGB hexadecimal color codes. We can write a regular expression that has three parts: a hash symbol, a character class for the hexadecimal characters, a repetitor operator indicating that we are looking for 6 characters that match the above class. So this is a typical example of reject search. Yeah, exactly. So let's see how we could do this in Sourcegraph. So this is going to give you results of hexadecimal color codes that have 6 characters in the CSS language. So what we've done here is I've shown you 3 different, how to use 3 different types of code search in Sourcegraph. So do we all understand, how to use Sourcegraph for code search? I need to hear something. All right, thank you. Now this is where I would need 3 volunteers to come and attempt to do a code search of these 3 questions. 1 person for 1 question. 3 questions, 3 giveaways. Yeah, please come. Can we give me a round of applause? Okay, so let me just open sourcegraph.com. Yeah, let me just use this. All right, so which of the questions do you want to attempt?
I want to try question 3.
Question 3. So he wants to try question 3. So just come to the slide, yeah.
Commit. I think everything looks good now.
Awesome. Can we all give him a round of applause? Thank you so much. Please, what's your name?
Dubai.
Jubai. Okay, please come to our, yeah, noted. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a nice attempt, yeah. So you attempted question 3. So we have question 2 and question 1. No, I want somebody else. Yes, please come. Let's give him a round of applause also. Yeah. So which of the questions you want to attempt? Watch. Question 2. Okay, in the Sourcegraph repo, find a list of JSON files. Okay. Now, this is Ojuru. It's still Ojuru. No, you have to do it together. You've gotten the first part. Now, merge the 2 literal strings together. You're almost there. There's just you. Wait, hold on. You've gotten it. Don't delete it, but just look at it again and change one thing. It is that symbol. That's where the. Okay, time. All right, let me just show it to you. You got it really just here. So you see, it's not anything difficult for a newbie or somebody who's just learning how to code. It's straightforward and it gives you results.
Am I getting anything?
Yeah, sure, you would. Give him a round of applause again, please. Yeah, who wants to try the third and the final question? Yes, please come. Please make it snappy, make it snappy. A round of applause, please. So that's question one. In the source graph repo, find commits with the name func. Press the tab. Tab. Tab, yeah. Yeah. So you have results of commits where the word func exists. So the reason why it's bringing out a whole lot of extra luggage is the regular expression. Yeah. So we can see different use cases of code. Yes. Sorry, what's the name? Shola. So see us at the polling booth downstairs. Yeah. Thank you. So thank you to everyone who attempted, to use Sourcegraph for code search. So because of our time, I'll quickly rush through the batch changes section. So how many of us now understand how to use Sourcegraph to perform code search? Awesome, awesome, amazing. Yeah, so let's move on quickly to batch changes. So what is batch changes? Batch changes is a feature in Sourcegraph that allows you to make make changes to multiple repositories, multiple files, multiple code bases at the same time by just writing a batch spec. So I'll just quickly rush over this because of time. So example use cases of batch changes when you're trying to clean up common problems using linters, when you're trying to update depreciated libraries, when you're trying to upgrade dependencies. For example, you're on Python version 2, and then you are required to maybe move to version 3 or something. You can do this at once using batch changes, especially when you have a large code base, yeah, and then it helps you to standardizing build, configuration, and deployment files. So what are the requirements for you to perform a batch change? You have to have the latest version of the SRC CLI, Docker plus Git. You have to have either a Linux or Mac OS. Very advisable to use. And if you have your Sourcegraph instance with repositories on it, and then you have to have the right credentials configured from your code host, be it GitLab or GitHub. Yeah. So this is like the workflow. You create your batch spec. Your batch spec is like a YAML file that contains your batch changes that you want to make. You run the batch change, then it generates a preview URL, and then you apply the changes. So it creates like a change set, which can also be called like a pull request or a merge request on GitLab, and then you apply the changes if you are satisfied with what you see. So because of time, I think I'm just going to do one, and let me just quickly do the first one. Here's an example batch spec that describes a batch change to add hello to all the readme.md files. So let me quickly do that. I'll be dropping the mic now. So can we all see? Is it clear? All right. So I'm using my terminal here, and I'll be following the instructions that we have. Let me just see here. So we have a documentation on how to create batch changes. So I'll just be following the instructions here to create the batch changes. I'm in the document directory of my machine here, and then I have my batch spec in this file. So let me just quickly click on ls. So which one is it? Yeah, the dev first batch change. So let me just quickly open it in Visual Studio Code. Yeah. So this is the batch spec. Sorry, let me just hold it. Let me just quickly explain the batch spec. So what the batch spec is a YAML file that contains your batch changes, where you want what you want to perform using batch changes, where you want your batch changes to go to, and just definitions of how your batch changes should look like. So let me just give an example. We are all familiar with YAML files, yeah? And we know this syntax is not strange to us, right? Sorry? Can I go on? All right, yeah. So we have the name, which is basically the name of my batch file. It can be anything. Then the description. So this is a batch spec to add welcome to DevFest to all the README files in my repository. So what this batch spec is going to do is going to look for this particular repository in my Sourcegraph instance. So that's what this on. So the on means, okay, look for this repository, yeah, in the repository flag. Then in each of this repository, or in this repository, run this command, echo welcome to DevFest to, so this batch spec is going to find README files in this particular repository, and then it's going to run welcome to DevFest, and then it's been run on a container, an Alpine.3, yeah, and then it creates a change set, which is what we know as a pull request or a merge request. So this is the title of the change set, then the body, my first batch changes. All these things would make sense now that I'm about to run the this thing. Thank you. All right. So this is my file. Yeah. Let me go back to my terminal. So let me just do this. So we can see that we have the SRC. I'm using the SRC CLI. And then in order for you to use it, you have to specify the SRC. Then it knows that you're trying to make a batch change, and I'm trying to create a preview before applying it so that I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, so I'm going to look for the file, the name of the file, which is, there first. So it's going to do its thing. Oh, I've seen where the mistake is. I specified my name twice. So let me just make that changes. Yeah, let me run it again. So it created a change set for me, so I can look at it. So what this means is this repository already contains different README files. So what it's going to do is it's going to add this welcome to DevFest to all the README files in that particular repository. So this is basically what's happening here. So if I look at it, and so all the descriptions that you saw in the batch spec, this is everything here. And there's nothing in the commits here. So what this is going to happen here is, if I look at it and I'm cool with it, then I just go back to my batch spec, yeah, and I change this published to false. I put it to false because I don't want it to apply the changes immediately. I want to see it before I apply it. So I'm just going to change this to true. Then save it. Then come back here. So I'm just going to change this preview. It's still the same thing. I'm just going to change it to apply. So it's going to run the process again. So sorry, let me just help you holding it here. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry? Okay. So let me open this in the browser. I've applied the change set, so let me open this in the browser and let's see what it looks like. So we can see that we have, before it was unpublished here because I set published to false. So now we have an opened change set. So let me go back to my, let me just look at it once again just to be sure. Yeah, everything's as it should be. So let me go back to my GitHub repository and let's see if we have a pull request created. So repositories, yeah, that's it. So we can all see that one pull request has been created, right? So I click on it, yeah, and then, I click on it. Let me just see it. So if I'm satisfied with this pull request, and that's what I actually want to do, yeah, I just merge the pull request. I confirm it like, we always do, yeah. Now, this pull request has been merged. Now let's go back to the code base and see if what we actually did worked. So I have 10 different folders that contains README files. So let's open the first one. We can see, welcome to there first. Let me just show a few of it. We have it all in the README files. So this is just a simple example. There are a whole lot of complex things you can use batch changes. I just picked this one because of, I know this is going to be a mixture of beginners and intermediate and experts. So I just picked this simple one that we can all relate with. There are so many complex things you can do with batch changes on using Sourcegraph. So yeah, we can all see that all of the README files here in the repo contains the welcome to dev first. And this is as a result of the batch spec that we created. So it's basically, Sourcegraph basically obeyed the instructions of your batch spec. So imagine having to do this manually. It's going to take a whole lot of time here. So this is a problem that batch changes help you to solve. You don't have to waste too much of time having to go from this file, jumping from this repository to another. As long as you specify the instruction in your batch spec, Sourcegraph would help you do it, regardless of the repository, regardless of the code host, whether GitHub or GitLab, you can write your batch changes and Sourcegraph would perform the changes that you require in any of these code hosts. So do we all understand a glimpse of this, yeah? Let me quickly run through the second one. Yeah. So this is a batch change spec to find and replace the term number and employee details in a set of Python files. Yeah. So we are basically trying to replace these two words, number and employee details. So let's see our batch spec again. So this is a batch spec I wrote. Can we see it? This one here. So we all can understand from line 1 to line 9. So I'm just going to explain what this run does. So the name of our batch spec, the description, the repository we are trying to perform the change on. Then this is the step to perform find all of the Python files in that above repository. Now what this does is, I can't see this from afar. Okay, yeah, I can see it better now. What this does is it converts number to num1. It converts employee details to staff details. So, and then all of the other information about the change set. So let's see how we can do this using batch changes again. So I'm just going to preview it just to be sure that I have my find and replace on batch. Awesome. So it has generated the preview link for us. So I'm just going to look at it to be sure that this is everything I need to do. Yeah, I'm just going to paste and go. So we have a batch change, a new batch change here. So we can see that it has gone into all of the Python files in this repository. And then we all understand what this means, right? It changes this, the ones in the red are like the old ones, the one in the green is the new one. So in every place where we have number and employee details, it's going to change everything to num1 and staff details. So let me look through just to be sure that we have everything here. So in all the files, it has changed everything for me. So if this is what I want and I'm satisfied with it, I go back to my batch spec again, and I convert the publish to true because that's what I want to do. Then I save it again, yeah, and then I'll go back and run. This time I would apply it. I don't need to preview it anymore. So I'm just going to change the preview to apply quickly. Yeah, and then it's going to create an open change set for me. It's always advisable that you preview your change before you apply it because, you never can tell. You might actually make a mistake and then you want to rectify it and all those things. So it's standard practice to make sure that you preview your change. So I'm just going to go back, check this again. Yeah, so we have an open change set. So let me just look at it again to be sure that. Yeah, perfect. So everything is about to change. So let me go back to my GitHub repository. Let me look for that repo. Yeah. And we have our pull request. So I'm going to look at it. So let me just look at it. The file changed. So I have about 3 Python files here that I'm going to make this change on. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Perfect. So I'm going to merge my pull request. Yeah. And the pull request has been merged. So let's go back to our code host. Let's see what we have. So in file 1, we now have num1 instead of number. Yeah. In file 2, let's see what we have in file 2. We have our num1 too. I think the staff is in file 3. Yeah, so the staff details and everything. So I just used 3 Python files just for us to save time and just for us to get the concept of everything. So we can now see the different use cases of batch changes using Sourcegraph. So do we find this useful in our daily developer life? Can we all agree? Awesome, amazing. So let me just wrap this presentation up. Yeah, so we have a lot of customers using Sourcegraph currently, and this is just a fraction of many of our users. We have many users all over the world, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, the US, and yeah. So this is just a few of the users. And then if you want to learn more about Sourcegraph, we have learn.sourcegraph.com. You could write this down or snap it, whatever. And if you want to read more on our documentation, we have the docs.sourcegraph.com. We have the dev.to.sourcegraph.com. If you want to know more about Sourcegraph, you can read the About page. We have a blog there that specifies, different articles that you could read up that you find interesting. And then we have something called Dev Tooltime, where we have, how many of us have heard of Dev Tooltime? Where we invite different developers from different companies. They showcase their dev tools that they use to make their work easy. This is something that you could watch. And then we have a podcast too that we invite different developers from different companies, to talk about anything from tech and how to make life easy for them. And we have a growing Slack community whereby if you have any questions about Sourcegraph, you can always ask in this community. Please, I would enjoy you all to join. Any questions you have, I will be able to answer, or any of my colleagues on the team will be able to answer you. So we have people from all over the world currently in the Slack community, and it's a very growing and thriving community. Can I move on to the next slide? I can see people snapping. Awesome. So just a recap, we now understand the power of Sourcegraph. We can write search queries. 3 people were able to write, search queries. You can make code search. You can create a batch change spec. So what the batch change spec I create is just a simple example of different ways you can apply batch spec. So if you want to learn about batch changes, you could visit our batch changes documentation in our docs, and then you could learn more about that. And then, if you have any questions, please ask in the Slack community that I shared earlier. and then you can send a tweet at Sourcegraph, and somebody will be there to respond to you. Or you can send me a DM on Twitter, Bali_Michael. You can find me on Twitter, and then I'll be able to answer any of your questions or direct you to the appropriate person to answer your questions.
You said the popular practice is to make sure you preview before you publish.
Yeah.
All right, fine. So when you are writing the source file, the
Batch
search,
spec?
yeah, the data spec, you set is it false? What do you set to false?
Publish to false.
Publish to false. And
Yeah.
what if you set the publish to false?
Mhm.
And you set the under the enclosure, you set it to publish. So what is there not going to be any conflict? I noticed that you set it to false. False says to.
Sorry, I'm
when
not
you
sure I
set to
understand the
false,
question.
when you set to false,
Yeah.
you set it to preview. So
Yeah.
when you set it to true, you set it to publish. So what is now you false preview? So is there going to be any conflict in that?
That's a very good question. So I could easily remove the publish if I just want to preview, but I just left it there because for time and just for me to be able to carry everybody along. So when I'm using preview, I don't need to have the publish in the batch spec. So me setting the publish to false cancels any conflicts whatsoever. Do you understand? Yeah. So that's why I set it that way. But usually when I'm just previewing, I could just remove the published flag there and just leave it as it is without the publish and get what I need to get. Have I answered your question? Yeah, thank you. We have a very rich documentation that you could read. Yeah. So you can see we have documentation about batch changes. If you want to learn about batch changes, if you want to learn how to integrate Sourcegraph, we have extensions, Sourcegraph extensions that you could integrate to, VS Code, all of those things. We have documentations about Sourcegraph Cloud. Sourcegraph Cloud is something new that we are developing, whereby you can use Sourcegraph in cloud, And if you would like to contribute to Sourcegraph open source version, please, I would enjoin you to join the Slack channel. And we have a whole lot of people trying to contribute to Sourcegraph, making Sourcegraph better. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them on the Slack channel, and somebody will be able to respond to you. So I think I've exhausted my time. I hope we all had a wonderful time at this workshop, and thank you all for listening.